or more learning communities? I should ask maybe the opposite question, how many don't, and then we embarrass people and then it's bad. I used to do this giving presentations on my campus, and my provost, you ask a true-false question, my provost would pop up and say it's true and it wasn't. This is not good to put people. We may have different, really, definitions of this. For example, by a first-year seminar, I am not talking about an orientation to college class. Such a class might be useful for certain groups of students, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about, I will go in more detail in the follow-up session, but we're talking here about a discipline-based course taught by a faculty member. It could be full-time, part-time. It's a substantive course. It's credit-bearing. It might be a gen ed counting course. It might even count in the major, but it's a discipline-based course. A lot of institutions have to attract and engage students. They've given them, kind of floppy-eared titles. The faculty member comes up with a title that describes their intellectual bliss, Star Wars and the Human Experience or something like this, right? But these are substantive, discipline-based, credit-bearing, often writing-intensive or inquiry-intensive courses. This kind of course is the introduction to college that we want our students to have. It's small. Oh, well, Professor Koo, we can't do small. What do you mean? I'm talking 22, 25 students. Oh, Professor Koo, where do we get the money to do? Well, you go to the man with the money. If the University of Michigan can make a first-year seminar available to any student who wants it in their College of Science, Art, and whatever else the title is, if the University of Texas at El Paso can do this, their nickels weigh like manhole covers, right? I'll say more about El Paso maybe a little bit later as an illustration. So you let your eyes roll through this list and you say, good news, Professor Koo. Our campus, my campus, offers all of these things in some version. And then I say, that's terrific. How good are they? Do you know? Moreover, or maybe not moreover, equally important, who gets to do them? Later I'll show you that the students who could most benefit, can you repeat after me, compensatory effect? The students who could most benefit from these high-impact practices are least likely to sign up for them because they're optional. One of the things we all know is that first-year students don't do optional. Hello, is anybody out there? Carol Twigg found this out. Carol Twigg runs this National Center for Academic Transformation. She's a technology guru. She's proven over and over again that you can accelerate learning with the appropriate use of technology. And she learned early on that you can't just throw technology at students because they may not use it in the way you think they should. What a surprise. All right. Remember deep integrative learning? Come on, of course you do. That was just like 35 minutes ago. Nobody has a measure, as I said. So we said, what if you took a behavioral orientation and you said to yourself, if you believed this, that the more practice students get at doing things, the better they'll become. I think John Calipari has taken this to heart. So Kentucky, shoots 21 out of 22 free throws, makes 21 out of 22 free throws when they play Indiana, right, in the Sweet 16. Game was fixed. Then they shoot, 50% the next game, they still win. Anyway, it's good. We think the more people get practice at doing stuff, the better they get, especially if they get feedback. And that's what we're asking students here. How often do you integrate ideas from different sources? So if you think students are doing this on their own because they're attracted to the concept, if you believe that, I got to spend more time with you later. right? Or included diverse perspectives. These two things are faculty-driven. These two things are in the nature of assignments that we devise and ask students to work on, inside or outside of class. And we could go through this list, discuss ideas outside of class with a faculty member. This is where, as a faculty person, I turn the conversation from Big Blue, or whatever it is. I think Kansas wears blue also. This is a problem tonight. Turns the conversation from whatever it is to a substantive orientation about this class. Well, you get the drift. So we ask students to answer these kinds of questions. Two more data charts. Presto Remco, here they are. And you can actually see these from the back. Now, so there's this column called Deep Learning. You see this up here, Deep Learning. And then here are some of these so-called high-impact practices. They're on both sides. The charts are identical. That's good. How many of you are social or behavioral scientists? That's or applied, or whatever it is, right? So when I say to you statistical significance, does your pulse beat faster? Huh? When I say that to my dean, his pulse always beats faster. When you say, I've got a paper accepted at the American Educational Research Association, I mean, he flushes, you know. So, but the people who are the applied social behavioral scientists, you also know that the larger the N, the more people, the more likely you are to find statistically significant findings. So I am at the top of my game because NESE has 4 million students and 1,400 institutions. I can ask any question and I get a statistically significant finding, and I can publish things that make no sense to anybody anywhere. Thank you very much for your time and your attention. These pluses, so everything on these charts, everything is statistically significant. Okay, take that off the table. These pluses represent something more important to us in our practical work on campus. These are effect sizes. Effect sizes. Fortunately, the behavioral social science is moving in this direction, saying, what is the practical value of the statistically significant finding? And when you see 2 or 3 pluses, it means the difference between those who do and those who don't is really big. And that's just what this display is showing. If you've done a service learning course, right, you are much more likely, it's like a standard deviation difference in terms of the frequency with which you do these kind of deep learning activities. It's not going to get any better than this, so I hope you're with me. We don't even know how good the service learning course is, right? Those of you who've mucked around in service learning know some of these courses are maybe better organized than others, and yada, yada, yada. So there's a lot of noise in the data in a way, but in other ways, the fact that the noise is there and you get these huge differences says something about the nature of the activity. Are you with me here? So if you've done one, across the board, you're benefiting. This is a different slide. This is going back to the engagement premise. And across the top, these are, those of you who are familiar with NESE and SESI know we have these kind of cluster scales, you can call them. So there's level of academic challenge. This is the reading and writing stuff we were complaining about earlier. Students don't do enough of it. This is our dirty little secret, really, but students say they do more reading and writing. The expectations that faculty set for their coursework, their tests are more challenging. That's what academic challenge represents, right? Active and collaborative learning, this is giving class presentations, working with groups, working in groups of students inside or outside on instructor-mediated activities, you know, where we learn to work together and also apply, yada, yada. Student-faculty interaction, this is the kind we want. Substantive, ideas, inside, outside of class. Supportive campus environment, the social support stuff that Aaron especially talked about in his opening statement. Again, across the board, students who've done a high-impact activity say they're more engaged. Maybe they're lying to us, right? Maybe you know, these 800,000 students are lying. It's a conspiracy. That's what we need. We'll write a novel. Something happens in these kinds of experiences when students work with faculty on research. I mean, we all testify the life-changing experience of study abroad, right? Even though most of those folks don't have data. They're finally getting to it now, trying to demonstrate. But we got a lot of anecdotal data, and we actually do have some data. We can talk more about that in the follow-up session. And we will. We'll unpack these a little bit more. But for now, the takeaways. Why? Why does this happen? Because students spend more time and energy on the stuff associated with this experience. Do they sign up wanting to spend more time and energy? Especially at those campuses that require learning communities or first-year seminars? You know, are they eager to outperform their peers by choosing these? No. But the kind of activity channels it, right? I mean, if you're teaching an inquiry or writing-intensive first-year seminar, students write more. And that means they spend more time. They interact with their peers as well as their teachers around substantive matters. Service learning is a classic example. When they're out in the field, either on or off campus, working in an area, whether it's reclaiming the land in an intro bio class or, you know, a shelter for battered women, children off campus, you're now in the company of peers studying the same theory and research that describes, we hope, best practice. And you're discovering that the book is wrong. Holy crap. And when I go back to class, I got to talk about what I found in the company of my peers. And I also discover something else out there. When I'm working with these peers, man, do they have different points of view. Holy cow, who'd have thunk this person who looks like me would see the world in such a different way, right? And they journal about that. And they, if we do this right, they discuss it. They are, oh, here it comes. They're reflecting, they're integrating, and they're getting an opportunity to apply. And if we do this work well, they get more feedback. They get feedback from an internship supervisor. They'll get feedback from the host family they're living with when they're studying away or abroad, right? They get more feedback. It's in real time. When something blows up in the lab, you know, the lab instructor doesn't say, let's just walk away from this and we'll talk about it next week. You see an expert, right, in the throes of managing a quasi-crisis. I've overstated it, okay? But even the small crises, collecting data in the field, right? And when we ask them, when we put this not final, but when we ask them to show us, to think about it, to reflect, integrate, when we require them to do it, right? And then this last point, do you remember goal realization? Students coming to grips with, and in their own words, saying, I know why I'm here. And by the way, this can change on a dime. You know, they can come up with other reasons why they're here. But one of the ways we get students to draw closer to what we're trying to accomplish with them and give them some opportunity to put struggle in their own words is to have them apply what they're learning outside the classroom. Well, you can't see that, but this is a pilot training program. Yeah, it's too shadowy. Learn to fly here. This is a student pilot who aced all the written material. This is why when airlines hire pilots, they like demonstrated expertise. I guess it's one of the reasons. There are other things here that maybe I'll spend more time on in our follow-up session. Well, we've already heard a little bit earlier about how important expectations are. I'll come back to that in a second. But this last point about, I'll put this in soft language. And I want you again to be thinking about where in your curriculum are students required to show what they can do. I mean, in the kind of integrative way, right? That they're, well, not just pulling it all together, because that puts so much pressure on the last year, or whatever it might be, the last course in a certificate program, or the second year of an associate, or the fourth year, so-called fourth year of a baccalaureate experience. We need such culminating experiences, but where else in the curriculum do we ask students to show us what you can do? Now, in our academic world, that is supposed to be the final test in the course, right? In some courses, maybe it's appropriate, but can you take what you're putting on that piece of paper or on that computer screen and actually show me how you can use it somewhere else? In another class, in another activity on campus. Well, so, quickly, this is my what? I just like it. Phrase, you can't leave serendipity. Remember the days, some of us experienced this, you know, where college, we talked a little bit about this last night over dinner, where college, we built these places away from the cities. I'm talking now 1800s. So, of course, in most places, the cities have now grown up around college. But we did that to remove students from the evils of the real world so they could concentrate, they could spend all of their time in the company of really smart people like you and their peers, right? Not distracted by the evils of commonplace. And we assumed that if you held people, put them in these places, didn't let them out, that good things would happen. And sometimes they did. That's called serendipity. We don't have that luxury anymore. We got to squeeze more out of everybody who shows up. And the way we do that, I don't know any other way, is to get more intentional and to use more often what we already know works. I mean, if you've got data on your campus to show me that something I've said so far is wrong, this is bring it on. No, I mean, I'd be curious about that. But every place I go, when people dig in, they find that these general patterns hold. So we should insist on our own, individually, in our own programs, and when we are on campus committees and elsewhere, we ought to insist that people are using what works. And boy, is there a lot of stuff that, when done reasonably well, works almost every time in a positive direction, more or less, with just about everybody. I'll spend more time on this in the follow-up session, some of the nuances here. But here are some of these engaging pedagogy and practice. And by the way, I'm not saying that every class has to look like this, right? I mean, just imagine, well, I'll come back to this in a moment. All of these things are workable in virtually any kind of class. Some of these things are flat out embedded in the nature of certain disciplines. Nursing, the arts, theater, and so on and so forth. That's an advantage that they actually have. Okay, now, what are we learning from places that are taking student success seriously? Gosh, what was you had a great phrase, Aaron. I hadn't heard it used this way before. Appreciative advising. Did you mean that? I love it. You're a much more sensitive human being than I am. I'm saying, well, we probably mean the same thing. I mean required, in-your-face advising. Now, some students don't need this and so on and so forth, but we've made huge mistakes, I think, presuming that our databases will lead students to make the right choices. when they themselves, remember goal realization? They themselves aren't clear what it is they're supposed to be getting out of this. Stop, well, you can read this second bullet. So I hope not to be goring anyone's ox here. What we know almost for sure is that when you let a student into a class 3 weeks into the term, you have done that student a grave disservice. Because the odds are huge that they are not going to do very well. You can look it up. These are some of the things coming out of the Achieving the Dream project. This is, who's here from Jeffersonville? I mean, you're part of that deal, right? And a lot of two-year colleges around the country. I'm working with a four-year university that's involved, and I don't think these things are peculiar to the two-year sector. In fact, I will say this, the thing about Achieving the Dream that's been great with me and working with the SESI folks is the differences between the two-year sector and the four-year sector are not nearly as great as we always want to say. You may disagree with me on that, but the same pedagogical strategies that work in the four-year sector work in the two-year sector, and vice versa. I'll take you on that one. I mean, we have slightly, well, never mind. I'll talk more about that later if someone wants to pin me. Stop it. Now, it's a moneymaker for us. I mean, if that's why you're doing late registration, then you got another entity to report to. Well, we talked a little bit about this over dinner last night as well, a math refresher. You know, a lot of our campuses, we've got a math placement test, and most of the people who walk in to take that test who haven't done math in 10 or 15 years, do you know how they do on a math placement test? Can you predict this with any degree of accuracy? They do awful. So we grab them and we stick them in a low-level math class, and after 3 weeks, they're saying, what the hell am I doing here? Because it's coming back, right? Some of those people could be in the regular math class if they had a math refresher. Again, this would be nothing we would report out of this room. This is another huge moneymaker for us. But it's the wrong thing to do because we're keeping students from the goal, which, and the further out they are, remember, the fewer hours they, okay. I bet that if I spent some time with your registrar, I'd find a half a dozen classes that have DWF rates, meaning, for the unwashed here, 30 and 40% of the students in that class are not getting credit for it because they've either dropped it or they got a D grade or an F grade, no credit. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. We typically think it's math, the gateway math classes, and that's often the case. The good news is there are math faculty across the country taking this on with demonstrable success, changing the way math is taught. I'll give you some examples in the follow-up group. I'm not going to do it now. But this is awful. It borders on the unethical behavior of our universities when we allow these courses to continue without shining a light on them and beginning to take seriously how we would change instructional practice. I'm going to give you one example just to grind this home. I've worked with a university where 15 sections of the same Intro to Political Science class is taught every semester. And the average DWF rate is 10 to 12%, except for 2 sections where it's always within 2 or 3 percentage points of 40. This is the same course. And those 2 sections have been taught by the same faculty member for years. And the department chair, relatively new, said he didn't know it. Now, that's an extreme example, right? You know, who among us, who are the academic leaders among us that are going to go back and say, I want to know what those classes are, and I want the department chairs to know? This is not about taking out a billboard on 64, because we got to be very sensitive to how we manage these kind of data. But we better know, and we better have something going on to address this pedagogically. There may be some explanations for student preparedness, and maybe our placement tests are not good enough, and that's part of the list. I want to make one more comment, just one more comment on this about the last bullet. There's something that Aaron said, I thought, very persuasively about family and community, whatever that, but especially the family. How many of you are first-gen students? I mean, you were the first in your families to go. Yeah, me too. Me too. I don't have data about this, but, and this was not about me, but I think what happens, just one other data point. It is still the case that when a student is thinking about leaving your institution, as we say, prematurely, in the 4th week or the 9th week or the 2nd semester, they are going to talk with a family member first. It won't be the academic advisor or the residence hall counselor or somebody it won't be talking to a faculty member. I mean, sometimes that happens, but most of the time, they are cueing a faculty member, advising and seeking advice maybe from a family member, parent, guardian, maybe a sibling. If you have never been to college, if you have not had good experience with the educational system, class system, I mean, we bemoan the fact that a lot of low-income parents don't go to parent-teacher conferences. I mean, think about why. I mean, a lot of reasons why, but one of the reasons is they don't know the language that is spoken there. Just so when the student says, I'm thinking about, this is the first-gen student saying, I can't do it here, there's nobody here like me, and then they say, my goal realization is not clear enough. All right, it's a joke, come on. How do we provide the ammunition for such loving family members, because their response is a loving one? You did your best. This was a huge risk. You did something nobody in this family has ever done before. You tried. It just isn't working for you. Come on back and we'll figure it out, right? My kids called home. I had a list of 10 offices that they had to go through, another dozen people. There was no way they were coming home. Now, you can probably discern from my personality orientation why that is, but my point is, I knew how to work the system. I knew, first of all, that they could do it, and that I know from my own research, most students at some point kind of hit the bump in the road and they say, this isn't me, I can't, but most can. Most can. So I don't have a solution to this, but I know it's more than a parent newsletter. Yeah, we got FERPA issues. I say we require every student to sign that damn form during orientation when they don't have a clue as to what's going on. And then we make our move, right? No, this is not about singling out students, but it is about trying to make the family a major player in this experience beyond what we've figured out how to do. All right, money. You know the book Moneyball and now the movie, and too bad it didn't win. My favorite character was the bean counter, whatever his name is. He's now everywhere. But you know the storyline of this book, which is trying to figure out why a Major League Baseball team in a small market